What's up, everybody? I'm Blessed and Free. Welcome back to another episode of DOC TV. So you guys already see what today is. I got an interview, and today's interview is kind of special. She's been through a lot of stuff in her life. Her son was murdered, and she actually mentors the guy that murdered her son. And she's been to prison, and she's got a wild story. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the people watching at home? What's your name and where you're from?
Well, my name is Terria Vandenherk, also formerly known as Terria Walters. I'm from Alaska, currently live in Anchorage, which is the biggest city in the state of Alaska. I grew up in Fairbanks, which is the second most biggest city. The valley can be considered that too, because it's grown so much. But I've lived in Alaska since 1977. My parents came up from the lower 48 to do the whole pipeline thing when the pipeline was running, and I've been here ever since. I've left a couple times when I was a teenager, when I was running the streets and traveling down the West Coast, but every time I've always come back to Alaska.
What was it like for you growing up in Alaska? Like, were you a good girl? Did you get in trouble? Did you dabble in any drugs? Like, how was it like for you? Obviously up until the time that you got arrested and went to prison.
Well, I grew up in a home that was riddled with drugs and alcohol. And so, I did drugs with my parents. I drank with my parents. And then in 1984, I was 11. I was taken from them and placed into Alaska State's custody. So I'd already experienced drinking and doing drugs before I got put into state's custody. Bounced around from 13 different foster homes within 3 years. And then they placed me in group homes, and a lot of those foster homes were abusive. I have a lot of horror stories about, some of the foster homes that I was in, and then group homes. And then because the state of Alaska passed legislation where if you are a ward of the state, it is against the law to run away. And so I ended up getting arrested at the age of 14 for running away. And they institutionalized me at Fairbanks Youth Facility for 2 years. I was sentenced to 2 years. And my charge was actually called unlawful evasion. Their technical term.
Wow.
But basically, it was just running away.
Do you not have any regular family that you could go to that was like a safe place?
No. Addiction runs really thick in my family. My birth mother, I was taken from her when I was a baby, and my dad manipulated the situation, and my mom was a teenager, so I could have gone to her, but she had her own, she had mental health issues, and didn't really know how to defend herself. So they basically put me in state's custody. And I have a feeling, because I've been watching this for over the years, is, foster care is a cash cow. It's about money. I can compare it to the Georgia Tan history back in the day when, you take kids and you get to make money and adopt them out. That's how I compare the Alaska foster care system. But then when I got sent to Fairbanks Youth Facility, it was, it's a teenage prison.
Yeah.
And it was co-ed. And yeah, it was co-ed.
Alaska's on some crazy shit.
Yeah. So I ended up, this is in the 80s.
Yeah, there was some babies getting made at that youth facility, I bet.
Well, not when I was there, I don't think, but we all lived, of course, there was relationships and all kinds of stuff that was going on between the teenagers. But my sister was 12 when she got put in there.
Oh, wow. So you both were in the same youth facility?
Yeah. She did the same program that I did. She's 1 year and 3 months younger than me. We both got placed in state's custody, and she eventually got emancipated at the age of 14. She got pregnant and had a child.
Let me ask you a question, because I never went to foster care. Luckily for me, my grandparents stepped in when my mom, same issue with me, with your mom and my mom, they sound identical. And I always, people always ask me like, well, what was going on at that point in your life and how are you handling that? And it's hard to find an answer for that. You know what I mean? Because you go through so many emotions and things that go on. If you had to look back when you were in that place for that 2 years, knowing that you couldn't leave there, knowing you had no family to really, like, your backbone is essentially ripped out from under you when you grow up like that. What was the plan, or did you even have a plan at that point? Like, when I get out of here, what am I going to do? Where's my life going to go? Was that running through your head?
Not really, because basically the system was set up on how good you can be. I lived my life on a point system, and if I did good, then I got good points. If I did bad, I got bad points. So I was basically like judged on my behavior rather than dealing with the underlying issue. When I was in, they did a glass warrant on my grandfather. And I got him over a glass warrant while the detectives, I was 15 at the time. My grandfather had molested me and my sister, and he admitted to it over the phone, and they never did anything. And so I felt kind of like they
Helpless.
failed me in that aspect,
That's wow.
So, I didn't really have a plan, but then of course my 2 years was getting, coming up. And so my probation officer at the time sent me to Kodiak, which is an island. The only way out is by boat or a plane. And they sent me there to the Kodiak Baptist Mission. It was a Christian program. And they did it because they thought that it would keep me from running away. And
on an island?
Yeah, put me on an island so that I wouldn't run away.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, so but that didn't stop me, because I ran away, and then I, resumed doing drinking and doing drugs. Back in the day, in the 80s, it was wine coolers and, all that. And so it really didn't stop me.
When would you say in your life that, it turned from wine coolers to like the real dark road that, addiction and living like that takes you down eventually? When would you say that was that pinnacle point happened in your life?
I would say, at 16, I was hitchhiking a lot. I was baiting hooks in Seward just to kind of survive. And then this guy picked me up hitchhiking, and he contacted his family in Seattle and said, I have this homeless teenager. Would you be able to take her in? And they bought a plane ticket, and I got on a plane to Seattle. I was 17, and they took me in. And from there, I ended up leaving after a couple months and started traveling down the West Coast, following the Grateful Dead and hanging out with hippies, going to Haight-Ashbury, taking a lot of LSD. I was 17, and that's when I first experienced LSD, and it was in San Jose, California. And then I eventually went down to San Diego, and that's where I planted there. And then I got involved with the kids that were down on Mission Beach, and I started using meth. So I was homeless, sleeping under bridges with rats. I was panhandling for food and sleeping under hollow bushes. And then I met my son's dad, and he convinced me to get a place with him in what I called cockroach motel, is European style. And people that were living in there they were doing drugs. You shared a bathroom. You'd find people shooting up in the hallways in the bathroom. And so that was my life. And I was up for days and days and days. Then I'd crash. And living that life, you're like living in a chaotic environment, and that you're not going to have a healthy relationship, so you fight and argue, and because you're high, and eventually you crash out, you wake up, and you start doing it all over again. And that, I was 17 when I got really into the hard drugs, and then I got pregnant.
Okay. So you had your son
in Alaska.
And okay, so you went back to Alaska.
Yep.
Did you go straight back into the drugs after he was born, or like how did
Yep.
all that? Okay. And
It was so bad that we didn't have a lot of the drugs here in Alaska back then. It was mostly cocaine. And so at one point I even had someone mail me some meth through the mail, small amounts. I mean, I wanted meth so bad that, I mean, I literally had somebody send it to me, and I was a kid, you know,
dang,
doing,
girl, you were about that life.
yeah, yeah. And I, you know, tried to be a good mom, but I really didn't know how to be a mom because I grew up raised by the state and then living on the streets, you know. I
Yeah.
loved my son. There was a love for him that I can't describe, but I was messed up myself. So, you know, not really having any kind of direction of having my own home life, and then growing up in foster care and juvenile detention group homes, really there was not any kind of, you know, guidance.
Direction.
Right. And I had a lot of trauma that I had never dealt with, like things that I never understood of why I was using drugs, or it was just, I thought that that's how life was, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So what was it that sent you to prison?
Um, well, in the 90s, in the mid 90s, when Oxycontin came out, um, I actually got bit by a pit bull, and I went to the hospital and they prescribed me painkillers in the emergency room. And I was like, oh, wow, I liked it. And I ended up, when the prescription ran out, I started uh, seeking it out on the streets. And then, you know, the powerful Oxycontin came out, and I started buying them off the street. And I didn't know that they were physically addicting. I was just taking them. And then all of a sudden, when I stopped using, I got violently sick. But I thought I had the flu. And then I would take one, and then I'd start feeling better. And I was like, am I addicted to these? And then I couldn't stop because I would get violently sick. Like I was on fire, like my legs and everything, like was, is even if I wanted to, I couldn't. Well, I got addicted to opiates and tried many times to get off of them. And then obviously I doctor shopped
I
and
was
got,
big in Alaska.
oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now you're speaking my language. I know all about the sponsoring and, you know,
Yeah.
seeing 10 doctors in 1 week, making a bunch of money. And then, you know, I know how that all goes. So what in Alaska, they didn't have a database in effect that would red flag you?
Not at the time that I know of, but there was doctors known in town. And I mean, I even saw correctional officers going to the same doctors.
Oh yeah. You see like
Yeah.
lawyers, everybody there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some
Yes.
people don't understand the gravity that like you said, in a town, there's usually like, you know, in Tampa, there was like 10, and it was just offices. Like I could pick you up and 4 of your friends, put you in my car, and by the end of the day, we would all have $5,000, 400 pills of whatever you wanted. And that's how it was for years. And it's just crazy because like the government knew that shit, and it just kept going on and on and on. And in the meantime, you know, so many people are dying a day, so many lives are being ruined, and it's all because for what? And that's the almighty dollar. And that's what everybody was chasing at that point, and they still are. And now it's just, you know, private prisons and all that shit. But
Yep. Yep.
so did you get caught trafficking opiates, or what was it that sent you to prison then?
No, I would get my prescription, and the last prescription that I mean, I've gotten Oxycontin, fentanyl patches, Tadian, which is morphine, oxycodone, and then my pain doctor prescribed me methadone, the 10 milligram ones.
Yeah.
And he said, I want to put you on this, and you're going to need to be on it the rest of your life. And
That's not what methadone's made for. You're not supposed to be on that shit the rest of your life.
yeah, so
Great doctors.
he gave me my prescription was 7 pills 3 times a day. So it was 21 pills a day, 210 milligrams of methadone.
Damn.
So obviously I would take them, and then I was selling my pills to make money also. And because I couldn't take that many, methadone lasts 3 days in your body, so you could take it and not be sick for 3 days. And
Yeah.
I could not take 21 pills a day and function.
Right.
So I ended up wanting off of this so bad. There was a point where I believed in God, and I was just begging God, please take this addiction away from me. I would take myself to the hospital when I'd try to detox myself, and I hallucinated. I would have seizures, and then I'd have to get back on it because nobody knew how to get me off of it. It was like, you can put me on it, but you don't know how to detox me off of it. And so I ended up getting into trouble. I had an ex-boyfriend and getting in trouble, and then I kept getting probation violations
Okay.
for a Class C felony. It was tampering with witness was my conviction. And I kept going back to jail, and I told my PO, I was like, you know what, just give me all my time because I'm not going to stop using. I wasn't ready. And I did treatment and all that stuff. And eventually I ended up getting out, and I had no supervision. But then I reached a point where I wanted to get off of this medication. I was like, I'm tired of it. It's not just that. I was selling it and buying heroin. I was doing everything possible to get high. And my ex-husband, I was talking to him, and he goes, well, meth can help you get off of it, since nobody's willing to help you get off of it. And so I was like, really? And so I stopped using the methadone and the heroin, and I ended up using meth. And I ended up getting addicted, thinking in my head, addict thinking, oh, I'm only going to use for a couple weeks until I'm completely off of the methadone. And then, obviously when I wasn't using the methadone, I was using the heroin, but I wanted to be completely done with it. And I thought in my mind that I was going to be cured, and I was going to stop using meth. Well, that didn't happen. I met a guy that was cooking it, and I let him in my house, and I learned how to cook meth. And my son was a teenager at the time. He was there while I was doing it. And later on, I had found out that he was my teenage son was stealing some of the meth from me and using it himself. And later on, I ended up using it with him. And I was cooking meth. And then I involved my son in the cooking of the meth. I would have him do little things here and there. And back then, and when I was doing this, and this is in 2005, 2004, meth labs were super thick.
On the radar too, right?
Oh yeah. And people were doing it left and right. The Alaska DEA was raiding places left and right. And in January of 2005, they raided, I was in a bus on a piece of property in rural Alaska. It was
good old in a bus. Sounds like a mess story.
Yeah, so I was in a bus, and I had a motorhome on the property, and they raided us. And this is only 8 months after I started using meth. Well, they came in, they raided us and charged us with all these different charges, and then they didn't indict us in time, so they had to let us out. And then they raided us again. It didn't stop me. I went out and bought all this stuff again and started manufacturing again. And 3 months later, I'm getting raided again. And this time there's a huge manhunt for us. And in April 2nd, 2005, I got in a high-speed chase from the police because they were looking for us. We were all over the news. And I was driving, and I was trying to get away from the DEA, and they ended up surrounding us and took us to jail. And I ended up, obviously I was detoxing. I was suicidal. I got beat up by the correctional officers there in the pretrial. And I was in a place of brokenness. I just did not want to be like that anymore. And they had put me on 2-man status in solitary confinement. And that's when I just made a decision that, you know, I was going to fully surrender and that I was going to figure out how I was going to change my life. And I want to make it clear that DOC is not what changed my life. Putting
No,
me in
yeah,
prison
I
is
already
not
know.
what changed my life. It was people that volunteered and people that helped me understand about my addiction, but also speaking into my life and showing me that I had worth and addressing the things that was leading me to use. Then I started to have these aha moments and understanding that my addiction was a symptom of a much deeper issue. And I needed to deal with the issue in order for me to be able to walk through, you know, future things that may cause me trauma, such as the murder of my son, you
Okay.
know.
I was going to be my next question. So you're in jail on federal charges, I'm assuming, right?
No, I was
Oh,
state.
state?
They gave me state, and I was looking at, I had 11 felony charges, and 2 of them were, I was facing 99 years each on them.
Were they minimum mandatories?
Yeah, 5 to 99 years on 2 of them. And then there's presumptive sentencing in the state of Alaska for the other felonies, like a minimum amount of time that they can give me. Because I had a prior felony, it aggravated
Brings it
my
up.
case.
Yeah.
Yes. And so the DA was like, I don't care that she's had all this trauma, you know, all these things have happened to her, you know, she had a choice. And he didn't understand it. I mean, literally, you know, all they look at is the crime rather than the underlying issues, and they
Right.
want to just hammer people. And so they sentenced me to 20 years with
Damn.
8 suspended. 20 years with 8 suspended.
All
And
right.
so
All right. So you get 20 years. When did the murder happen with your son, and how did that go down?
I ended up, you know, defending myself on my sentence. They took away my right to apply for parole, and I fought it and ended up winning. And so I got out in 5 years on parole.
Yeah, big
And
fuck you to them.
huh?
A big fuck you to them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I had
that's
6
good.
years of direct discretionary parole to still do. They would let me out on parole, so I was still under that system, and I still had all that time hanging over my head if I got in trouble.
Oh yeah.
But I
So,
was done.
so a
So
half fuck you, but in 6 years a whole fuck
yeah,
you. You know what I mean?
yeah, I didn't have one violation. But my son at the time, you know, he was clean and sober, but then, you know, he had some things that he hadn't dealt with, and you know, him and I stay connected. My son was a very loving, kind young man, very forgiving. He was the only person that, you know, stayed in my life. He'd visit me. He got straight A's in school. He was prom king. He did very well, and both our lives were, you know, being rebuilt. But then he, you know, had some abandonment issues. Him and his long-term girlfriend broke up. She went to military. He got diabetes and could not join the military, so he had some depression and he ended up relapsing. And so it just kept, you know, it was an issue, and I kept fighting for him. He got arrested, got sober, and then came and lived with me and did very well for a while until he got into a relationship with somebody else and relapsed February of 2015. And, you know, we fought and argued. I gave him options. You know, I'm here for you. You know, I understand what you're going through. I will help you in any way possible. And he chose to move out and ended up coming back 3 weeks later because he got arrested again. The cops raided his motel and came back home and was sober for a while. And then I started seeing signs like 2 weeks before he was killed, and, you know, confronted him. And June 22nd, he's like, Mom, I got a job. I'm going to get myself together. Walked out the door, and the last thing he said to me is, bye, Mom, I love you. And he never came home. And I searched for him for a day and a half. And the trooper that arrested me 10 years prior is the one that came to my house at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to tell me that they had found my son shot in the head and in the back seat of his car.
Damn.
Well, and he was robbed. He was robbed. I knew that it was over drugs. I already knew what it was over. I mean, I was like, first I asked the cop, I was like, he's diabetic. Was it diabetes? Did he, something happen? He's like, no, it's a suspicious death. And I instantly knew that it was, over drugs.
All right. Damn, I'm sorry to hear that. That sucks. And that's a big reason why I wanted you on this channel, because I'm sure there's people that watch this channel that are either I know there's people that watch this channel and are in addiction, or everybody knows somebody dealing with addiction. It's so prevalent now. So, I mean, this is a perfect example on why you should get help and stop doing the things you're doing, because you never know like when it could be you, you know what I mean? And it can be you. Everybody thinks they're invincible, but it happens to the best of people. You know what I mean? Like they say the good die young, and honestly, it's almost truth. You know what I mean? And so when that happened, what was your next course of action? I mean, obviously you're grieving and stuff like that, but I know that eventually you went through a program, and I want you to tell the people like about that and how all that happened.
Well, when my son was killed, I had 10 years clean by this time. I'd been out 5 years. My son, I got out in 2010. He was killed in 2015. And, I'd had many years under my belt, but I had dealt with the issues that was leading me in the past to use drugs, so that I understood how to walk through any other form of trauma that may arise. And I was serious about my recovery. So I kept positive people in my life. And it was the last thing on my list. People were like, oh my gosh, are you going to relapse? I'm like, no, I'm not going to relapse, because, first of all, I have God in my life, and I have huge support in my life. I know that it's relapsing is not going to fix the issue, and I want to be able to sit in my feelings and be able to walk through it. So when people are in active addiction and they really want to get themselves together, that's why I even tell them, hey, you're stronger than what you believe about yourself. It just takes that first step. Even if you don't understand about your addiction right away, getting help and getting connected to peer supports and people that are going to counsel you and help you walk through it is paramount to staying in recovery. And when you have traumatic events happen in your life, that's when you cling to your support system even much stronger. So this is why
I have a question. Is it possible to live your life, right? Like everybody's heard the story. You were doing drugs. You had a rough upbringing. You were fully addicted to drugs, I would say, by 17, from what I've heard. Is it possible to just be on a drug binge and wake up one day and look in the mirror and say, like, I'm done, and just stop and don't do anything to, like, don't have support, don't go into recovery, but just say, hey, I'm done, and continue on and live a productive life? Do you think that's possible?
No.
Okay.
If you don't have peer support, if you don't have people speaking into your life, if you don't have any kind of, even if it's not peer support, if you don't have a church support, if you don't have whatever your path of recovery is, you may try to do it for 2 weeks, but there's still some things going on in your brain. We're organic individuals, and you have to have
the least.
Right. You have to learn how to get your brain rewired, and drugs permanently, or not permanently, but they cause, misfires.
Yeah.
And it took me over 2 years before I actually was not having cravings every day, where I wasn't thinking about getting high. It took a while for me to be able to get through that process. And it was only when I was like, seeking out supports when I was in the prison, going after the chaplains, the volunteers, sitting down with them, doing all those things, and then entering into treatment that helped me. And I do not believe that a person can sit with the extension of, or extensive addiction that I had or anybody else may have, that just stopping without any kind of support or treatment or anything like that is, that it doesn't work. There has to be, I didn't even know how to be normal. So I know that I needed treatment, and I know I needed peer support. And I still, after 16 years, I still am connected to people that, support me. Cause there's times where I, in the past couple years, where I've like been in a deep, dark depression, and I have thought about getting high, but I didn't. People don't understand is it still creeps up. It doesn't matter how long you have those moments where you're like, well, maybe I could just do it one time,
Crazy, right?
One time is too much, and 1,000 is never enough. So I have to do that consequential thinking, self-confrontation all the time in order for me to stay on the path to recovery.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with everything you just said. I'm sure a lot of people watching do too. I just ask because there's some people that, that smoke some weed and they pop a couple Xanax and they live a normal life, and and they're not truly an addict. And some of those people say, well, just stop. Like, what's the big deal? You're getting arrested. You know what I mean? And it seems easy for those people to say that, but for the actual person that does drink, does the Xanax, and is an addict, and then creates that downward, cycle that goes on, it's not that simple. And if it was that simple, there wouldn't be fucking millions of treatment centers, addicts, and all this. So I agree with everything you said, to basically sum it up. So how did you get involved in the program that had to do with your son's murder?
Well, I'm an advocate, and, obviously after my son's death, I started, really hit the ground running. I was an advocate inside the prison, but I really amped it up. When I got out, I started, advocating about, we need to reinvest funds into treatment and detox rather than prison, because, it doesn't work like that. And then I continued making these connections, people that, all over the state, and then meeting people over in other states when I would fly out. And my friend, who from Juneau, she tagged me in a post that had to do with victim offender dialogues. And I applied. It was Van Jones that had posted it. I applied, not thinking anything, and I got a call, and I really wanted to participate because I wanted to sit down with the kid that killed my son. I knew he did it over drugs, and I'd already come to a place of forgiveness for him. So it's like I had to have that conversation with him, and I worked towards being able to do that. I did my interview, and I worked with the past administration to be able to get inside the prison with cameras, and be able to have that conversation. We did not have that. We don't have that still in the state of Alaska. We do not have a victim offender dialogue. There's no process of being able to, if a victim wants to have a conversation with the person that's caused harm to them, they can't do that. And so I wanted to be the first person to be able to do that, but also I wanted to have a conversation with the kid and let him know that I understood that his addiction took him that far. I did drugs with my son. Today, I'm like, I have issues that I did that, but I'm sober. My mind is clear, and I would never do that today, So I wanted to get the kid to understand that, he took his addiction to a certain level, and that it escalated, and he had to do something about it. And I was willing to help him walk down that path.
So take me through the day. I'm just curious of how I would feel when you walked in. I'm assuming you guys did this at a prison, right? And in the visitation room. So when you're about to walk into that visitation room, knowing the guy that killed your son is going to be in that room, what was going on in your stomach, your head? I know you said you already forgave him, but there's still that, I'm going to look right into your eyes type deal. what was that first, like, 10 seconds before you walked through the door? Like, what were you going through?
I had to take a deep breath.
I bet.
I mean, I still have anger when it comes to the loss of my son, because that's a life sentence for me.
Yeah.
I'm mad that my son was taken from me.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I did this even knowing that there was a possibility that the kid was not going to be accountable. But really, the forgiveness piece and me having this conversation was not, it was mostly for me. And then also wanting to make some sense in the loss of my son, but also um, be an example of what restoration looks like and how we can create a system of restoration for people that have committed crimes, that you know, we're not our worst offense, and that people need investing. If you say you want public safety, you say you want that, then how you do that? And that's rehabilitating people. So I had to, like, of course, I have God in my life, so that helped me
Yeah.
be able to walk through this, and understanding that he was going to carry me through it. And it was it was a week-long process. So I was filming for a whole week, and there was a lot of anxiety. You know, I went through moments of my own aha moments of shame. Talking about me getting high with my son, and then being able to come to a place of forgiveness for myself, and then uh, sitting down with the kid that
Yeah.
killed my son.
All
He
right.
was
So,
not accountable. He wasn't accountable right away.
but he eventually got accountable, right?
Just last month he called me, and this is almost 2.5 years
And you were
later.
a strong girl, because you're going in there, and now this kid's not even being accountable. I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I would have been like, listen, motherfucker, like against the wall type
Yeah,
shit. You know what I mean?
right.
You're a strong individual to be able to go through that. So what did the phone call go like when he called you a month ago?
A little back history of him. He got in trouble when I found out about his history. I was kind of upset over the system. The system failed him too. He got in trouble driving a drag car on the streets. They sentenced him to 3 years and sent him to our maximum security prison when he was a teenager. And he became a gang member and a drug addict inside the prison, and learned he was seasoned by the system, and then let back out into the community to keep reoffending, and his offenses escalated to murder. And so I hold the system accountable also. And so when I had a conversation with him over and over again, when about his being accountable, he's like, I want to try to do this and that. I said, well, you got to change. You got to make decisions that are going to be beneficial to your life, because you're going to get out someday. But also being accountable, and I want to see you leave your gang. I want to see you leave your gang and prove to me that you really are making a change. Well, he ended up getting sent to Lemon Creek, which is protective custody. He's not a gang member anymore. He has been sober. He's struggled, and since the dialogue that I had with him. But the beautiful thing about this is that he is surrounded with some good people that are in this prison, and the chaplain there has been working with him, and finally saw the documentary after 2 years, and he had came to a place of wanting to be accountable, because he saw himself not being accountable.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he called me, and he said, he goes, I just want to tell you that I did it. And he goes, and I remember reading in the papers and hearing your interviews that you were worried that your son had suffered, and you have all these things going through your mind. And he goes, I just want to tell you that your son didn't suffer. And I just want to be accountable for what I did. and I'm working on my life and I'm trying to change. And he wants to go into the Christian treatment program, one of the programs I ended up doing that was super beneficial to me. And I want to see that. I want to see him get rehabilitated, because he's going to get out, which 95% of the people that go to prison end up getting out.
So I definitely want to have you back on the channel again, because I know you said you were an advocate, and I want to dive more into depth about, you know, when you were in prison to what you're seeing now done in prison that really isn't being done, and how things can change and what goes on with that whole fucking mess. But do you have any social media you want to give a shout out to, if anybody, you know, is interested in maybe doing some of the things you're doing, or how they can, or for a family member, how would they be able to contact you?
My Facebook, obviously. I have other social media, but I'm mostly on Facebook, and it's Terria, Terria, and Terria Walters Vandenherk.
Okay. I'll put a
nobody
link.
else has that name.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description so it's easy for them to find you. But listen, I just want to thank you for coming on the channel. You're strong. You know what I mean? Just talking about, well, just you telling me what happened, like, it made me emotional. Just, you know, and I don't know your son, and I barely know you, but so it takes a lot of guts to do what you've done in your life, and, you know, turn your whole life around into something positive, and then reach back in the fire and pull people out that are still in it. So I commend you, and, you know, big salute to you for doing that. If you're new and you're tuning in for the first time, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up on your way out. And with that, it's DOC TV, and we're out.